I'm a girl, so I can't do this, this, and that, and I have to be straight, so I can't do that and that, and I'm feeling excluded because I can't afford to do that, and like I don't look like the other girls.
Alexis Williams, thank you so much for coming to POVz. It was so fun meeting you in person for the first time ever at our premiere, and now you're here on the couch. It feels very full circle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
How's your week going?
Crazy, a lot of school. I'm very tired, but I'm excited for summer to come soon.
For sure. And
Yeah.
I know you didn't get a lot of sleep last night, but I promise this will just be a calm, cool, casual conversation. And every episode here on POVz, we start off at the top with a controversial question.
Okay.
You ready to dive in?
Yes.
Let's do it. You are one of the most impressive people I've ever encountered on the internet, on my For You page. Not only are you an NYU student in STEM, but you're also a Black, Latina, queer Gen Z woman. And I feel like you have so many incredible pieces of your identity that I can't wait to tap into.
Yay.
And my question for you is, do you ever sometimes feel like a statistic?
I guess maybe like the kind of work that I do makes me feel like I'm making an impact in ways that are just more than numbers and me existing. I think maybe I'd feel differently if I felt like I was just pursuing STEM, but I feel like so much of my work has much more like heart and soul in it that it's like so impossible to like make that just a number of just, oh, another Black girl in STEM. Like, I don't know, I put way more weight into the kind of work that I do, I guess, that I don't feel like a statistic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm also not even doing like what traditional people in STEM are doing. So I don't know if it's fair to even like put me in that box. I don't know.
For
I
sure.
don't know. That's a hard question.
For sure. And you're just a human being. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
society tries to put us in boxes. When people ask, who are you? What do you typically say are the pieces of your identity?
I never know how to answer that. So it depends on like the kind of room that I'm in. I'll sort of pander to whoever I'm speaking to because I do so many things and
sure.
I can sort of fit in a lot of spaces.
Yeah. But let's say you're not having to
Yeah,
pander
true.
to any space. Like, how would you authentically describe who you are?
I would describe myself, I've started using the word like creative more and more because I never really felt like an influencer, but I think that's like what a lot of people label those who are like online, you know, creating content and like who have a lot of followers or whatever. But I never felt like I fit into that category because nothing that I really make on like different social media platforms feels influency, I guess.
Yeah.
So I call myself more of a creative now because, you know, I'm making like tools using computer science for people all over the world. So that's one creative thing that I do in my life, like my web development, and then making videos is another creative thing. And I'm tapping into a lot of different kinds of media in school as well. So I feel like creative, I guess, is a good label to put on all of it. I think like the first time I even got interested in the space that I am now, which is like activism and social good in tech, was when I was younger. I always thought I was going to be a writer. So I wrote like the first ever essay contest I entered. I wrote this essay and it won first place. And I was like 11 for no reason.
That's so impressive.
And I feel like calling myself a creative kind of links myself back to like where it all started, just like creative writing and just like being imaginative and stuff like that, I guess. So that's what I would say.
Being creative. I love that. It's awesome that that's an adjective that you would put at the forefront.
Yeah.
And would you say any of the labels by which I introduced you are labels that you would leave out when introducing yourself?
No, I talk about kind of falling into all those different labels all the time. If you follow me on social media, you will know that I talk about being all those different things. And I think that there's a lot of weight that comes with kind of having so many labels describe you as a person, but I also think that it kind of contributes to how unique I am as a person. And I think that it's like the little special recipe that makes me like Alexis. So I really like all of them. I understand how people like kind of want to shy away from labels sometimes, but it's also, you know, helped me find like a community in a world that sometimes I felt like lonely. I was able to use those labels to find other people who felt exactly the way I did. So I like them.
That's amazing. And the reason why I asked you that question at the top is because I know that you have been in certain spaces throughout your life as the only one. the other. And that's something that I, on certain levels, relate to. I was the only Jewish kid in my entire school growing up. And sometimes, it's easy to feel like a token or the odd one out. What was that like for you, sometimes being the only Black woman in certain spaces?
The biggest thing that I felt being kind of like other, especially when I was younger, is just like the feeling of not being heard. Like I felt so unheard for the longest time. And I think that that is the most, I guess, painful feeling about being alone or like feeling alone. So I think it's like kind of funny and ironic that like now I have such a big platform of people listening to me, because I always felt like no one was listening. So when I was younger, I always found myself in these predicaments where, I felt like I was being othered, but I would go to the people in charge and they would not listen to me. So I felt very alone in that way because no one was listening. So I feel like now just having so many people listening to me is like really, I guess, satisfying and sort of remedies like my inner child that kind of felt like that neglect from being like the only one. So yeah. I think I'm really grateful for that.
Isn't that interesting how sometimes we, in a weird way, close that loop
of
speaking to our younger self? I think I definitely have experienced that in certain ways. And it's amazing to hear how you have channeled maybe some of your experiences into your platform now. Do you think looking back on it and speaking to your younger self, you know something now that you wish you knew then?
I definitely do wish I could talk to my younger self. I think that the biggest piece of advice I would say to her is patience, which is the worst advice to hear when you're like a teenager or a kid. It's like, oh, just be patient, like your time will come, like things will get better. And like that's all that anyone seems to say ever to like kids and like teenagers. It's like, it'll get better,
hang in there,
like calm down, it'll be fine. But like I feel like if I was able to tell it to myself, I would believe me. At the end of the day, I did just need to be patient and wait for like me to not only feel more comfortable with myself and how I take up space in this world, but also get to a place just like environment wise and like surrounding wise that like felt more supportive and inclusive of all of the different kinds of things and kind of person that I am. So like when you're a kid, like you only have so much sort of control over who's around you and where you live and sort of what you're doing. But like only with time and as you get older and age do you have more control over like who's going to be in your circle and where am I spending my time and what am I spending my time doing. And I think that also has a big effect on like how you feel as a person and like how the outside world affects you. I think that like all of the things that sort of made me feel alone when I was younger, I'm now in a space where all of those things make me feel like celebrated and part of a community. So I think that all just took time and like space, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most special parts of college, right? It's like the first time in your life you get to pick your people, and it's not just the people you were surrounded by growing up.
Totally.
And what were some of those spaces growing up for you that made you feel alone or that you were unable to be yourself?
Definitely school. I think the thing about childhood is that you spend like so much of your time at school, and if it sucks, that's like so much of your time that sucks. So I grew up in New Jersey, which has like some crazy statistics about segregation and all of that stuff, and I think that I definitely got to experience that firsthand. My parents moved to the town that we moved to because of the schools. The public schools were really good there, and it all has to do with like wealth inequality and housing segregation and all that stuff. But it was a predominantly wealthy Caucasian town, and we were not wealthy or Caucasian, so it was really easy to feel other just based on that. Add on top of it that there was like a very religious community that we were also a part of, and just a lot of pressure on the basis of gender and sexuality and all that stuff. It made growing up very, very confusing because it's not even like I had one issue that I really needed to focus on sorting out in my head, just identity-wise. It was like a million different things because it was like, I'm a girl, so I can't do this, this, and that, and I have to be straight, so I can't do that and that, and I'm feeling excluded because I can't afford to do that, and like I don't look like the other girls and all that stuff. So I think part of the reason why growing up there and my childhood was so painful in that way was that it wasn't just one thing that I kind of had to focus on figuring out. It was like a million really different, really heavy things coming all at me at once. And I'm like 10 or something.
It's a lot to have to face as a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
And when do you think for the first time you had a realization that you were different from a lot of your peers, but you wanted to use your voice to fully be yourself?
It was probably around 10 when I was talking about that essay that I wrote a little bit earlier. It was for this competition called Breaking Barriers. The sort of idea of the essay contest was to write about a time you had to break a barrier. So I always kind of like note that as like the first sort of action in my activist history, because I decided to sit down and write about just this barrier that I was facing with the feeling of sort of feeling Black versus white within my peers, except for, of course, it was just me being the Black, and then all of my peers are like me and my sisters versus my peers. And that was the first time that I wrote about kind of race relations and like racial tensions and being able to solve that with patience. I think that's what I wrote about, and resilience. And knowing that like these big racial issues had nothing to do with me as a person was huge, which was like an aspect of what I was writing about, and not to take it super personally. So I think that that was the first time I not only reflected about like these huge issues within life, but I was also like pretty meditated about like how I felt about them, considering how like shitty they can feel.
For sure. And where you are now, I mean, we fast forward a bit. Do you still feel like you're reconciling some of those things every day?
A really popular sort of like online piece of like advice that I see all the time is like progress isn't linear. And I kind of really resonate with that, because I feel that in all aspects of my life, progress, healing, sort of reconciling with any issue isn't linear. Some days I like talk about something online and I'm like, I'm right. I know this is exactly how I'm supposed to feel about it, and that's that. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel less good about who I am, and like racial stereotypes and like the racial tension and the things people say to me online gets to me. But I think overall, it's just really important to like have strong moral principles, so that even if you have a day where you're off, knowing that I have these core values that I really believe in really like brings me back to center, I guess.
That's everything.
Yeah.
And I think normalizing the fact that progress isn't linear is half the battle.
Yeah.
We have to be able to talk about these things and put them out into the open. And watching you take off and, you know, be this huge TikTok figure now, an activist, do you still ever feel imposter syndrome or get nervous before you post?
No.
That's amazing. How do you do it?
I don't take social media that seriously.
Great.
So I don't get imposter syndrome when it comes to like social media. But like what's really important about like how I got to this place is I'm a computer science major, computer science adjacent. I do like web development and design. So what I've learned throughout taking a lot of computer science courses is that no one knows what they're doing. And I feel like that really translates to all areas of life. Like I am not convinced anyone knows what they're doing at all, which is why like even if I get like the tiniest bit of imposter syndrome, which happens, like you don't feel like the shit all the time, every single day, 24/7. You don't. The times where I don't feel like on top of my game, I'm kind of like, who is, you know? And then immediately I'm like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
That none of us have it figured out, and that's okay. But you do have something figured out. I mean, considering you built this platform, what advice do you have for Gen Zers out there that are maybe afraid to click post or still feel unheard? What would you say to them to have them start using their voices?
Just keep doing it. You have to do it every day, all the time, whenever you can. It's not about getting things perfect. It's about just like repetition, just doing it. Don't be so afraid that you're not going to be like #1 TikToker or like best activist or whatever. Whatever you have to put in is good enough. Everything else will come with time.
That is such great advice. Alexis, I'm so excited to take us to my favorite part of POVz, which is where we're going to start bringing in different perspectives from the larger Gen Z community.
Okay.
So keep an eye on your phone. We're going to send you some texts and you're going to read them out loud and react.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Men and women just simply have different skill sets, and everyone needs to just accept that reality. Based on that, literally anything you say about men v. women is fake.
What would you say to someone who thinks gender is not a social construct?
I would say you're wrong. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong that gender is not a social construct.
Do you feel like you're able to have conversations with people who think differently on that issue?
No. I just feel like people are too, I guess, polarized. And in my humble opinion, it's not worth having any opinions that invalidate other people's experiences. I don't really like to, I guess, discourse with people who do have those opinions, because not only do I believe that I'm not going to be able to change their opinions, because not to generalize, but a lot of people that think that way are stuck in their ways, and that's fair. But I just think that it messes with the good vibes over here. I'm okay with you being over there and thinking the sad things that you think, and I'm just gonna chill with my homies over here.
I totally hear you, and I respect that.
Yeah.
I think it's tricky because here on POVz, we really believe in hearing different perspectives, even if we don't agree with them, because it brings us a little closer together. I'd be curious to know, in your mind, I totally respect when you say, you stay there, I'll stay here, we can think our own things, but we don't have to come together. What do you think the solution is to bring us back together, if not to hear those opinions?
I think that the best way to bring two different groups that think so differently on something like that, especially, is respect. Both parties really have to come to the middle, come to the table with respect. If that's not happening, then productive conversations can't happen. And I'm all for productive conversation. We are not going to come together and have a conversation unless we have that sort of established idea of mutual respect.
It's huge. I think that's everything. And a lot of people forget that. If we can all agree on something, which is that we're going to respect each other, then we can actually have a conversation and not debate one another or each other's identities, but truly be there to listen and understand.
I want to get involved with STEAM, but I don't know where or how to start. This is a great question.
How convenient that you're here to answer that question.
There are so many different ways to start, and even better than that, there are so many different free ways to start. The way that I started is with a simple Google search. I literally Googled coding camps for girls for free online, and I found 2 coding programs that I have done, and I am now an alumni of Girls Who Code and Code with Glossy.
Amazing.
But literally, Google is your BFF when it comes to learning about STEAM. Literally anything there is to know about all of these different topics can be found online with a quick Google search. The amazing thing about the world and the internet and the way things have grown is that we can find so many free resources, which is so essential, just online. So learning how to code specifically, which is what I'll talk about because it's my expertise, is literally as simple as searching, I want to start coding online, and clicking some resources. But there are so many amazing organizations and camps and boot camps that you can do, and you can find them all online.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That takes some of the pressure off. I feel like it feels intimidating to go out and start something or pivot into a new field, but just by saying, just search it on Google, takes the edge off.
Low key. Yeah, you don't have to impress anyone.
Yeah.
Just learn because you're interested.
Love that.
Women have the same opportunities as men do in every field. I don't get why they're constantly complaining.
Do you think women have the same opportunities as men do?
Well, no, because I'm a woman and I've experienced this. It's just, there are stereotypes about women that are prevalent within society that prevent us from having an equal seat at the table. That is fact. If you see any man talking about women on their silly little podcast on TikTok, which has been popular these days, you will see that very plain and clear, that there are stereotypes that men in power harbor about women, and that fundamentally is a barrier to entry for women going into literally any field. I have walked into spaces where people have simply laughed at me for what I'm wearing or how I'm dressed or what I look like. I hate to be you can't trump lived experience, but that's the truth. I don't know.
Yeah, how can you argue with
I
that?
don't know.
And why do you think someone feels that way, that women are just complaining rather than advocating for equal access?
What I've learned as I've gotten older is that it's really, 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 really hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Like, people say it all the time, but you know, it's much harder to put in practice. And I have a lot of empathy for people who aren't able to do that. But for that exact reason, I say it's our responsibility to try harder. So I think that people that harbor that opinion just are having a really difficult time placing themselves in women's shoes. And I get that that's hard, because as a man, you will never understand what it's like to be a woman. I think this is also an opinion that is popular around white men, where it's very difficult to understand oppression in general because you don't face that much discrimination. So it's really hard to put yourself in the shoes of anyone who faces discrimination at all. And I have empathy for that considering, but I just say to those people, you need to try harder to put yourself in other people's shoes. Like, try harder, read a book, read some news articles, look at some data. I don't know, try harder. Like, there's no excuse.
Honestly, that's so valid. And I think you're right. We don't put enough effort into what it actually means to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Go the extra mile, take that next step. I love what you said.
Yeah. NYU is a fake school. There's not even a campus.
Whew, that feels like a personal attack.
So personal.
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is, that's true. NYU is not real.
Why?
Abolish NYU.
Abolish NYU.
No, I'm kidding.
That's a hot take.
NYU is a fake school. It only exists in movies. It's a shame.
Do you like NYU?
Yeah, I do. As much as I hate on it, I couldn't do what I do with computer science and design like probably anywhere else. And I've found like a couple of like new passions that I feel like I wouldn't have had like the space to explore had I not done the exact program that I'm in at NYU. So I feel like I will cut it some slack.
So like both can be true.
Yeah.
Like, on the one hand, it's a fake school. On the other hand, we
it's
still
not
love
real,
it.
but we love her. I want to start posting videos on TikTok, but I'm scared what everyone else will think of me. I think everyone kind of goes through that experience when they first start posting like seriously online on any platform.
Did you go through that?
Oh yeah. Like when I first started, yeah, because I was like, oh my God, is this like embarrassing? So what I did was I would wait till like 12:30, 1 a.m. to post anything, right? So that I would assume everyone was sleeping and no one could see it. And by the time I woke up, it would have like 1,000 views. So it would be like less embarrassing because I would be like, oh, look how many views it has. Like, you can't hate on me for posting on TikTok if it's like getting interaction.
Right.
So that's what I did, but that's so stupid. You should just post.
Honestly,
I was just filled with anxiety.
I feel you. Honestly, I've done that before, like post late at night. And also because if you post late at night, you can go to sleep and not have to sit around and wonder what people are saying.
Okay, so maybe that is good advice.
Yeah.
Like if you want to shy away from like the social anxiety of it all, and if you're like the kind of person that's always checking, which I feel like I kind of get like that sometimes.
Same.
Posting at night is good because then you just post, go to sleep, and you don't even have to worry about it.
For sure.
Smart.
And any other tips for kind of getting over that anxiety of what other people will think of you? Is it just inevitable?
It's inevitable. I feel, at least with like my anxiety that I deal with on the day-to-day, there's not much you can do about it. So I would just like push through it. Just keep going. You got this. Like, your anxiety is going to be there whether you do it or not. So wouldn't you rather just do it and then see what happens?
That is such good advice. I love what you shared today, Alexis. I feel like I took away so much about all of the interesting different facets of your identity that make you you, and how you've been able to overcome in order to use your voice and put yourself out there, even when you felt unheard. And so I have to ask you, before we wrap up today, if you could share one message with our entire generation, what would it be?
Life is too short not to do what you love, be with who you love, and love the people around you. Just love, love all the time.
That's such an amazing message. I think the world definitely needs a lot more of that. So, Alexis, thank you for doing everything that you do to bring more love to the world that we see, and for speaking up about what matters, having conversations that matter, and for doing that with me today.
Thank you.